So get comfortable in meditation posture. So legs crossed, hands in the lap. In this tradition, we usually put the right hand on top of the left, tips of the thumbs touching. The shoulders broad and open, the torso straight, erect and balanced, so you're not clenching or squeezing your muscles, not clenching them tight to stay straight, but just find a place where you're balanced, so you're not falling to the front or back, left or right. You're sitting erect, relaxed. And then the head, just the chin slightly tucked, just a little bit. And the back of the head slightly elongated. Right, so there's a straight line from the crown of your head down to the base of your spine. And then the eyes leave at a 45-degree angle. So the eyes half closed, and one's gaze kind of falling at about a 45-degree angle down. And then instead of looking at something with your eyes on the ground, pull the point of focus back a little bit, so your gaze is resting kind of unfocused in space, about 1 arm's length in front of you. And then your teeth and mouth, just let it rest in a natural position. And then usually the tip of the tongue, if you touch just to the roof of the mouth, just behind the front teeth, that's considered best. And then briefly scan through your body, which means mentally just look through your body. So usually we begin at the crown of the head, so bring your attention to the crown of the head, and then gradually bring your attention to each part of the body going down, and just see that, notice any tension or stress or tightness or discomfort. And then as you exhale, just breathe naturally. And as you exhale, imagine anything that might be an obstacle to meditating in terms of physical discomfort just flows out with your breath, flows down into the ground. And then mentally relax each part of your body as you scan through. Right? So that way, just bring your attention gradually to each part of your body, from the crown of the head down to the soles of your feet. We won't spend very much time on this now, but when you're meditating on your own at home, you can spend more time doing this. But take a minute like that, scan down through your body, relax. So then once your body feels relaxed and comfortable, you're seated in your meditation posture, feel yourself seated very stably on the ground, on your cushion. And then gradually draw your attention to an object of meditation. So we'll focus on the breath here for a few minutes, generate some concentration. So just bring your attention, your awareness to your breathing. Again, breathe naturally through your nose and mouth. And then watch the whole, well, why don't we try it a different way now? Watch the sensation of breath here at the tip of the nose. So breathe primarily through your nose. And just watch the sensation at the tip of the nostrils. Just where the air first enters the nostrils. Try to focus your attention there and think, generate the intention. Say for the next 3 minutes, I'll try to undistractedly watch this sensation of breathing at the tip of my nose, tip of my nostrils. And just watch as we inhale, exhale, exhale. You'll notice how each breath is different from the previous one. Some long, some short, some deep, some shallow. And then, so just simply watch the sensation of breathing in this way. And then when you see yourself thinking about something else, when you see your attention being distracted by thoughts about unrelated things, then notice that as a distraction and just let those thoughts go as best you can and bring your attention back to the breath. And then again, hold your attention there unwaveringly for as long as you can. But with the corner of your mind, again, watch to see when distractions are starting to arise. And if you see yourself thinking about something else, then again, let that go. Bring your attention back to the breath. Right? So try to meditate like that for 3 minutes. Thereby, we want to generate very stable focus that stays on the object, and very sharp, vivid focus that's fully aware of the object of meditation, right? Sensations of breathing in this case. And then, so having practiced some placement meditation like that, to focus the mind, then let's spend a few minutes generating a positive motivation. So usually at the end of any meditation session, even at the end of a day, at the end of any activity, it's good to think about why we're doing that activity. What's the purpose of it? And what do we aim to achieve in the short term, also in the long term, by doing that. So we want to have a good reason for whatever we're doing. So today, since the session is about enthusiasm or joyous effort, so I'd invite you just to think about like what's the most meaning. It comes down to what's meaningful in our life, generating enthusiasm for what we're doing by seeing it as being meaningful, by striving to do something meaningful with our life. So I'd invite you just for a few minutes think about what's the most meaningful thing that you do in your life, or that you wish to do in your life. You know, what's the most meaningful purpose? What's the purpose of your life, so to speak? What's the most long-term, highest aspiration that you have, that you strive for? Right? And then try to connect it to this very moment, right? This very session. How does it connect to that? Yeah, so try to think about that kind of issue. What's the most meaningful in my life? And how can, and then generate the aspiration that whatever I do now in this session may contribute toward achieving that, right? So if we feel something is very meaningful in a profound way for us, and then we connect it to what we're doing, then we naturally have a lot of enthusiasm for whatever we're doing. So first take a few minutes to just think about what is the most meaningful thing for you in your life, and then generate aspiration. Whatever I'm doing now may contribute towards being able to achieve that. focus our attention there. And then look at the text for today. So we're in this book, A Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, and on page 76, chapter 7. We're starting a new chapter today, chapter on enthusiasm. So why don't, just to kind of give the context, look at the table of contents first. Right in front of the book. There's the table of contents. We'll just look at, so we're on the 7th chapter, just look at the titles of the chapters that have gone before. Right, so this book, well, a guide, we should look at the title first. A Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, right? So Bodhisattva is a person who, Bodhi means enlightenment, full enlightenment. Bodhisattva is one who strives to achieve that, basically, one who lives their life in accordance with that the goal to achieve full enlightenment. So Bodhisattva is someone who basically they recognize that every happiness that they have, every enjoyment that they have, all comes about the kindness of other sentient beings. Not only the enjoyment we have in this life, but in the past life, the life before that. So from the beginning of this time, whatever rebirth we've taken, whatever form, every enjoyment that we've had, every form of happiness we've experienced, all comes about through the kindness and independence upon countless other sentient beings. And those other sentient beings are the same as us, so other human beings, animals, and so forth, are the same as us in having problems, suffering, pain, and misery, and wanting to be free from that, having hunger, thirst, confusion, wanting to be free from all different kinds of problems they have. And then also they're the same as us and wanting happiness, wanting stable, lasting well-being and happiness. So then a bodhisattva is someone who, with this sense of gratitude and concern for others, then they think, well, they think, I want to use my life to do whatever I can to benefit others. So what is the most beneficial thing to do is to eliminate all my, everything that hinders me from benefiting others. So jealousy, attachment, greed, anger, confusion, distraction, so mental distraction. So I want to eliminate everything that hinders me, that causes me to experience suffering and hinders me from benefiting others. And I want to develop all my positive qualities of patience, mental focus and clarity, wisdom, energy, enthusiasm, generosity, kindness. I want to increase to the utmost degree every positive quality through which I can use to benefit my family, friends, and all other sentient beings. So in short, I want to become fully enlightened in order to be of the greatest possible benefit to others. Right? So that's a bodhisattva, someone who lives their life with this attitude. I want to become fully enlightened, which is a state of elimination of all faults and the perfection of all positive qualities. Why? Not for a selfish reason, just because I want to be the greatest of the great, but rather in order that I use my life I use all the potential that my life has to be of the most benefit to others, right? Out of a sense of concern for others. I want to become enlightened. So then look at the table of contents now. So this is the kind of life, how does a person like that live their life, right? So if we aspire to be a person like that, what are the principles and sort of advice according to which we live our life? So then look at the table of contents. So the first is the benefits of the awakening mind. So awakening mind is this attitude of a bodhisattva, the mind that strives for a full awakening or enlightenment. So what are the benefits of having that attitude? This is the first chapter. Then the second chapter is confessing all of the mistakes that we made in the past, disclosure of wrongdoing, harmful actions we've done in the past that we regret and we want to try to avoid doing again. And then the third chapter is full acceptance of the awakening mind. So it's like you can in a ceremony, if you decide clearly that you want to make this a leading principle for your whole life, then in a kind of ritual ceremony, then you can you can formally adopt this attitude of striving for full enlightenment. So that's what the third chapter is about. Then the fourth is once we've devoted ourselves to living our life in this way, in this altruistic, radically altruistic way, working for the welfare of others, how not to forget that and not to slide back, but rather to be conscientious about living like that. And then the fifth chapter is called Guarding Alertness. So that means basically avoiding mental distraction, keeping the mind focused on continually acting in a way that contributes towards our enlightenment and not acting in ways that cause us to fall back from that. And then the sixth chapter, which we just finished recently, was patience. So recognizing that anger, becoming angry and generating a malevolent attitude, hatred towards others, is one of the most harmful things on the spiritual path. Then how to endure when others malign us, others harm us, or just when we encounter extremely difficult circumstances, how to not give up, but rather be patient and have endurance and keep going. Right? So then the seventh chapter is what we're looking at today, enthusiasm. So basically the opposite of enthusiasm is laziness. Right? So how to avoid being lazy. So there's three kinds of laziness, we'll describe at the beginning. So these are the opposites, right? The thing to be abandoned is these three different kinds of laziness, it's laziness which is just likes to loaf around and not do anything at all, right? That's the most common. What we most commonly think of as laziness, just sitting around, not doing anything, kind of procrastinating about doing anything, just sleeping, and just sitting around listening to music, watching, endlessly watching scrolling down on Facebook to see what's there, and just kind of wasting time, right? Not doing anything productive. That's one kind of laziness. Another kind of laziness is actually attachment to engaging in activities which are harmful. So, think taking drugs and alcohol, or just playing, a lot of, engaging in crime, in theft, or lying, or cheating, or engaging in criminal activities, or activities that are harmful to oneself or harmful to others, is another kind of laziness, because it's a distraction from us doing anything that's useful and beneficial for ourselves or beneficial for others. And then the third kind of laziness is actually low self-esteem, deprecating, thinking again and again to ourselves that I'm incapable, I can't do this, I'm not able to. I'm not able to do anything useful. So by thinking that in that kind of negative way about ourselves, we undermine our ability to do anything useful. So that's also a kind of laziness. So in this chapter, he goes through sort of how to generate enthusiasm in a general way in the first place, and then looks at those three different kinds of laziness, and looks at antidotes to each of those. So this chapter is 76 verses long. So I'm hoping to get through about 20-25 verses today. So maybe we can finish the whole chapter in about 3 sessions. So one session today, and then the next session, I'm not sure, after a couple weeks. Okay, so let's look at the verses for about, half hour, 45 minutes. And then we can discuss, and then we'll meditate again. So chapter 7, enthusiasm, verse 1. Having patience, so remember patience was the chapter that went before. Having patience, I should develop enthusiasm. For awakening will dwell only in those who exert themselves. Just as there is no movement without wind, so merit does not occur without enthusiasm. Right? So having patience means once I've stopped getting angry about things, right? So that's not a problem anymore. I can patiently endure whatever hardships I meet. Then I should also develop enthusiasm. So like energy, enthusiasm is like an energy, a positive energy that wants to do something, that takes joy in doing something, that feels motivated, strongly motivated, and has a desire, kind of drive to do something good. Right? So having patience, I should develop enthusiasm. For awakening, so here means full enlightenment, will dwell only in those who exert themselves. Right? So anything useful that we can achieve, it doesn't come just by itself. Right? We have to make some exertion. You have to make some effort. Just as there is no movement without wind. So without the wind blowing, you know, in the leaves and the trees and the fields, nothing moves. Think on a totally windless day, things are just completely still, right? So there's a sense that nothing really changes. But with wind, then you see things moving and you feel like there's change. In the same way, just as there's no movement without wind, so merit does not occur without enthusiasm. So he's saying we need merit as like virtue or positive, kind of positive energy in order to make progress in our, you know, in order to improve our mental condition, our mental state, and make improvement in our inner life, also in our relationships. We need to have like this kind of positive energy. So that requires enthusiasm. Without enthusiasm, then we don't engage in positive or constructive actions. You know, thoughts and meditation and learning and, you know, reflection and also, you know, external actions that produce merit. So we need enthusiasm. So then verse 2, what is enthusiasm? It is finding joy in what is wholesome. Its opposing factors are explained as laziness, attraction to what is harmful, and despising oneself out of despondency. Right? So first, in the first line he gives a definition of enthusiasm, as he's talking about it here. What is enthusiasm? It is finding joy in what is wholesome. Right? Really taking joy in like being a good person, for example, in acting with kindness. You know, for example, you can have enthusiasm for being healthy, physically healthy, right? If you feel like, you know, maybe one day you eat like tons of French fries and onion rings and milkshake, and then you feel like crap afterwards, right? And you maybe decide, oh, you know, if I keep eating like this, I'm just going to feel worse and worse and worse. You get overweight, rather than get a high blood pressure, and have a heart attack and die young, right? So then you can maybe generate enthusiasm for being healthy. You know, then you start eating at yoga stand instead of, you know, your friend at Taco Bell or something, exercising every day. And then you see, like, you know, eating home-cooked food, you know, lentils and rice and like vegetables, not eating too much, you know, eating in moderation, exercising a little bit, going for an hour walk every day. How you feel so much better. You know, you feel lighter, you can think more clearly. When you wake up easily, and you just, yeah, you feel healthy, feel good about yourself. So in that way, you can generate enthusiasm for having good physical health. Right? But of course here we're not primarily talking about physical health, we're talking about mental health. So in a similar way you can see when you treat others with kindness, speak kindly, smile, then you feel good about kind of who you are, how you act, how others perceive you, how others think about you. Whereas if you kind of are arrogant and kind of belittling other people and bossing other people around and kind of frowning and scowling, then you don't feel so good about who you are, right? So it's difficult. Then what do you have enthusiasm for? So enthusiasm is basically finding joy in what is wholesome. So we have to think about, well, what does it mean, wholesome? What is it to be a good person? Yeah, virtuous, wholesome, but what does that mean? And then why do we take joy in that? Well, basically through experience, through experimenting. Okay, so that's what enthusiasm is, finding joy in what is wholesome. And then its opposing factors, so what's the opposite of it? Its opposing factors are explained as laziness. So that, when it says laziness there, actually there's three kinds of laziness he describes here. But when he says laziness there, he's talking about what we typically think of as laziness. Just, you know, laying around on the couch, sleeping in, just not doing anything, you know, sitting around, watching the cars go by, don't really feel like doing anything, right? It's just that kind of laziness. Then the second is attraction to what is harmful, right? So this is attraction to, drinking and, actions that are harmful, like, drugs, alcohol, especially if you're getting addicted to those things, or lying, stealing. Like when we're growing up, there's always the chance to get in with the wrong crowd of kids. The kids who go steal motorbikes, or, break into, vending machines and steal the change, or lie to their parents, lie to their teachers, skip off school, don't study. Probably at work, anyway, all through life there's the opportunities to do harmful things, like engage in adultery, theft, petty theft, or these days, I don't know, computer hacking, or kind of basically wrong livelihoods, actions which harm others, not to mention criminal things. So there's laziness of just not wanting to do anything, the laziness of attraction, engaging in actions which are harmful, and then finally, and despising oneself out of despondency. For many of us, probably this is the biggest kind of danger. Because even if we work very hard, we don't engage in very destructive actions, but it's easy to have a very low self-esteem, have a very negative opinion of oneself, by always thinking again and again and again about one's failures. I mean, whoever tries to do something that they've never done before, they're going to fail at some point. That's just natural. But if we dwell only on our failures of the past and then tell ourselves that we're not able to do anything useful or productive, then it totally undermines our ability to, to try new endeavors in the future. Okay, so he'll go through those three kinds of laziness one by one. But first, let's look at verse 3. Because of attachment to the pleasurable taste of idleness, because of craving for sleep, and because of having no disillusion with the misery of cyclic existence, laziness grows very strong. Okay, so, I mean, if we just think about this life, even just look at this life, then, craving just to sleep all the time, it becomes a big obstacle, to studying, to working, to, having constructive relationships with friends, or, finding a spouse and having a family, all those things. Just idleness and sleep, or, just hanging out with friends, not doing anything, playing video games, all those things. So that's one kind of, it's just looking at this life, how that laziness becomes an obstacle to doing anything productive and having a rich, meaningful kind of life. But then in the third line he talks about, and because of having no disillusion with the misery of cyclic existence, laziness grows very strong. So here I just have to mention quickly, well, what does he mean by cyclic existence, with the misery of cyclic existence? So in the Buddhist view, of course, then it's not just that we, as a person, that we exist only in this life, but rather, before the moment of conception. At the moment of conception, of course, the sperm from our father and egg from our mother, they come together and then our body starts growing. But then, at what time does consciousness arise? Right? At what time is consciousness? Because consciousness is not something physical that we can weigh, or it has shape or form or color. It's something that's non-physical, but it's the energy through which we know and we experience things, right? That's why we're different from a corpse, because we have consciousness. A corpse doesn't have consciousness any longer. So at the moment of conception, where does consciousness come from? Then the Buddhist view is that, well, because just like, the sperm and the egg cell, they don't just arise out of nothing, right? They have to have a substantial cause, something that became those. So those causes, the sperm, the causes in our father's body, his body produces sperm, the egg, the substantial cause, the stuff that becomes the egg of our mother, comes from the mother's body, right? Which comes from their food and from their parents' bodies, and the story goes on back through their, their genes and their body. It's a physical, the story of the physical kind of, beginningless chain of causation which led to those two physical things arising, right? And those two physical things become our body. That's why our body grows out of those, nourished by nutrients and stuff. But then what about the story of our consciousness? We have consciousness now, so we can see the awareness, the mind that we have now. It arose from the previous moment of mind that we had just a few moments ago, which we can look on back at a stream of awareness that we have back through, last year, the year before, all back to our earliest memories. And then we can't remember beyond that, but the Buddhist view is that something physical cannot become something mental, right? So the substantial cause of our mind cannot be something physical, because there's two fundamentally different kinds of things. So at the moment of conception, what's the substantial cause of the first moment of consciousness at that time? Has to be a previous moment of consciousness. Thereby it has to be a previous life. Right? So that's the reason we establish past lives. So then how many past lives we have? According to the Buddhist view, you can't posit a beginning. Because the positive beginning would be illogical. Because it would mean, a beginning would mean there was nothing, and then there's something. Right? Like there could be a beginning of this particular plate, right? It can have this particular plate can have a beginning because it didn't exist, endlessly. But you have sand and lime and I don't know whatever other stuff you use to make glass, and then you pour that into a mold, and then it cools, and then this plate forms. But the continuum of matter, which is in this plate, does that have a beginning? This is just something physical, right? So the sand and the quartz and the lime and whatever the physical stuff. Before it was this plate, it was in the form of this molten glass. Before it was that, it was in the form of some powder, some, fine grain, like physical stuff. Before that, where was it? I mean, it was probably something on the earth. Before that, it was celestial dust in the universe. Before that, went back to the Big Bang. We speak of our universe. What came before the Big Bang? Kind of a huge explosion of all the matter that constitutes our universe. Could it come out of just nothing? If that was the case, then we should see things arising just out of nothing all the time. That would be a property of the universe, that something can arise out of nothing. But that's not the case. If we look at the physical universe around us, every physical thing that arises, it has to arise from a particular set of causes and conditions, right? It can't just arise out of nothing. So consciousness is the same. So if there was a beginning, a very beginning to the stream of consciousness, it would mean there would have to be a moment where there's no consciousness, and then it's just produced out of nothing, or basically like that. So anyway, so the Buddhist view is that there's past lives, because stream of consciousness you can't find a beginning to. But then why do we take rebirth in the particular form that we have? Because of certain energy in our continuum. Our physical and mental continuum, but primarily in our mental continuum, that we engage in certain actions so that at the time of death, we engage in karma, basically. You have all heard of karma, I'm sure. So we engage in positive and negative actions, thereby we create karma. We place imprints of karma on the mind stream. Then each time we die, certain imprints get they ripen, or they're like seeds that are kind of moistened, and they produce a sprout. So, especially the final thoughts that we have at the time of death, they're like the water which moistens the seeds in our mind stream, seeds of karma. And then those karmas ripen and they throw us into a future rebirth. Right? But the primary cause is because we grasp at a strong sense of self. So that as we're dying, we grasp at the self as ceasing to exist, and that throws us into a rebirth. So this process of taking rebirth, and then growing old, dying, and then again taking rebirth through forces in the mind primarily, again and again and again, is samsara, or what here is cyclic existence, right? So the Buddhist view is that as long as we grasp at a self in an afflictive way, we grasp at the self as existing in the way that doesn't, we have this, and thereby we have an overly self-centered concern, selfish concern. Then we'll keep throwing rebirth again and again and again, and we'll keep experiencing the sufferings of birth, old age, sickness, and death. So that's the misery of cyclic existence. And all the different problems that we have will never go away as long as we don't eliminate the causes for taking rebirth again and again. So that's what he's saying in that third line there. And because of having no disillusion with the misery of cyclic existence, laziness grows very strong, right? Because if we think that, like, when we die, like many people think when they die, then it's all over, right? Then we totally cease to exist. There's no existence after death. Then it kind of, it's easy to think, well, why should I do anything in this life? Because whatever I do, whatever I produce, it's all going to end with my death, right? And then everything will be over. So why? Whatever wealth we acquire, we'll all lose at death. Whatever friendships, relationships we have, they'll all end at death. Whatever possessions we have, whatever reputation we have, it'll all end with our death. Of course, if we produce something, like a family, we have a spouse, a family, have a big family. It's not like our whole family dies when we die, right? We die, the family remains. So for many people, even they don't believe in a future life, that's kind of the solace, is that I can be so productive in this life, have a family, produce a business, produce, school, university, or just my own reputation, and they think of all those things that will remain after we die. which there's some sense to that. But here more he's talking about, but even if we have a very productive life and leave behind all these kind of things which are beneficial to others, of course that's very good. But as long as we take rebirth in samsara through the force of afflictive emotions, ignorance and other afflictive emotions, then we'll continue to experience misery again and again and again. So in that way, then we're lazy about doing anything to eliminate the causes for future sickness, old age, and death, and so forth. Okay, so let's look at verse 4. Enmeshed in the snare of disturbing conceptions, I have entered the snare of birth. Why am I still not aware that I live in the mouth of the Lord of Death? Right, so that's where so this is just like I was saying, he's talking about why, enmeshed in the snare of disturbing conceptions. So the main three are ignorance, which grasps at a truly existent self, which doesn't actually exist at all. And then from that, strongly grasping at this kind of self that doesn't exist, then we generate attachment for things that we like, and we crave after those things, and aversion to things that we don't like, and we generate hostility and anger towards those things. So then these disturbing emotions lead us on a kind of roller coaster of ups and downs, emotional trauma. And then they also lead us into birth. So enmeshed in the snare of disturbing conceptions, I have entered the snare of birth. So once we experience birth, then necessarily we experience aging, sickness, and then death again. Why am I not still aware that I live in the mouth of the Lord of Death? Then verse 5, I do not see that he is systematically slaughtering my... Do I not see that he is systematically slaughtering my species? Whoever remains soundly asleep surely behaves like a buffalo with a butcher. I'm not sure how a buffalo behaves with a butcher. But here I think the analogy is like that an animal that is going to be slaughtered, they don't know they're going to be slaughtered, right? So the butcher, every day, where I live out in the countryside, you see all the carcasses hanging into the butcher shops along the main road. You see the carcasses, the chickens and the goats, chickens and goats mostly hanging. So, and sometimes you see the butcher like leading the goats along the road, but they have rope around their neck and he's leading them on the road. The goats, they don't know where they're going, right? So they just happily go along, following the butcher, but literally they know that he's going to take them to the cutting block and kill them. So, because of their ignorance, they don't know that they're going to this place where they're going to experience, incredible fear and the suffering of losing their life, right? Which is the thing they cherish the most in the world, right? Just like us. So, so Shantideva is saying to us, why are you being lazy? Because you know that you're going to die. He's assuming that we already accept the fact of, or the existence of future lives, right? That we have an understanding of cyclic existence. That as long as we don't eliminate anger, attachment, and their fundamental cause, this self-grasping, right? This self-grasping, this exaggerated, what do you say? Obsession, this exaggerated obsession with my own, likes and dislikes, my own wants and needs at the expense of caring about anybody else, because we have the exaggerated sense of self as being something independent from anybody else or anything else, right? So, so based on, and it's that force that throws us into rebirth, which causes us to experience sickness and death again and again. So he's saying, do I not see that the Lord of Death is systematically slaughtering my species? Basically systematically killing people like me again and again and again. Why? Because I take rebirth through the force of my own ignorance. Whoever remains soundly asleep, so whoever doesn't do something to try to escape this very difficult or miserable situation, surely behaves like a buffalo with a butcher, blindly going towards their own slaughter. Then verse 6, when having blocked off every escape route, the Lord of Death is looking for someone to kill, how can I enjoy eating? And likewise, how can I enjoy sleep? So here he's really talking about, so here in the next quite a few verses, he's talking about death. well, obviously, I mean, death in the kind of, in the aspect of, like this Lord of Death. Actually, there is no really Lord of Death. It's just the fact of that we're all going to die. But why is he talking about death so much? As a way of motivating us to think about, well, what is it that I should do with my life? Right? At the very beginning, when I asked you to think about what's the most meaningful thing in your life, I mean, there's different ways to think about what's meaningful in our life. But one thing I mean, for many people, they never really stop to ask the question, like, what is the most important thing in my life that I want to do? Like, there's a very helpful kind of advice that I heard from some kind of motivational speaker or coach once, but I found it's quite useful, is that, you know, it's important, say you have a jar, like a glass jar, and then you have a pile of different rocks, like valuable rocks, very precious rocks. And they don't all fit in the jar, right? So if you put in a lot of small ones, there's different sized rocks, some small, some medium sized, some big. So if you start just filling the jar up randomly without thinking carefully, and you put a lot of small ones and then medium sized ones, and the big ones, they won't fit at all because there's no space left. So if you want, the biggest ones are the most valuable, right? So if you want to get the big ones in, you need to put those in the jar first, and then the space that's left in between, you can fill up with the small and the medium-sized ones as much as you can. So like that, I mean, if we don't think about like what's most meaningful in our life until we're dying, which is the case for many people. Imagine we're dying, and then only we realize, oh, what's most precious to us, what's the most meaningful to us in life. By then it's too late. You know, we've already filled up all of our time and energy with meaningless things. So it's important from the outset of our life to think about, well, okay, I only have, maybe I have 60 years left. At the most, maybe 80 years left to live. What do I want to do in that time? To recognize that we only have a fixed period of time. We might not even have that long. But if we live a long life, we have at most maybe 80, maybe 100 years. And most of us are not going to think about what to do with that life until at least 20 years in, right? At least 15. I mean, not many of us are thinking as 10-year-olds, like, what is most meaningful in my life? What am I going to do with my life, right? So at least 15, 20 years in, you start thinking about these big questions. And then, but if you don't think about, so then it's important to think about, well, okay, I'm going to die eventually, what is it I really want to do? So then you have, if you think about it well, you have your whole life ahead of you to really work on and do that. But if we never stop and think about, like, what is it that I should do with my life, then we end up, 50, 60, at the end of a career, at the end of maybe a marriage relationship with, maybe went well, maybe didn't. And there's a danger that we feel like I kind of didn't use this opportunity well, right? I just kind of fumbled along and did what I could, and then without really thinking about what I want to do, and then end up not having done anything that oneself feels very proud of, or very satisfied by, very fulfilled by having done, right? So how to address this is think about death, to think about the fact of death. It's only, it's kind of like, it's only in relation to this kind of salty food that sweet food tastes nice, right? If every food we ate was just sweet, then sweet wouldn't be anything special, right? If every food we ate was just kind of salty and spicy, then that also wouldn't be special. Food tastes good because of the contrast between different flavors, right? So like that, life only really appears to have any meaning in the face of death, right? So death really helps to bring into sharp focus, like how precious our life is. If we always just kind of drift along thinking, I'm never gonna die. Of course, if we logically think about that, we know that's not the case. But we habitually kind of think like, I'm only 30, I'm only 20, 30, 40, I'm going to live a lot longer, this year is already so long, today is so long, not to mention this week, not to mention this month, like, I have a lot of time left, there's no worry, no need to think about like what to do, I'll just kind of get by the best I can. So, if we habitually think that we have a long time left to live, and we don't really think about what it means to die, like what that's going to what that entails, what that actually is going to be like. That means, there's no seeing anything anymore. There's no hearing anything anymore. There's no tasting anything anymore. All the people I love the most, my parents, my siblings, my friends, I never get to meet them again, ever. It's totally finished, those relationships. And even this identity I have, that I'm this person, I'm the child of these parents, I belong to this, I'm from this place, I'm a member of this country, I speak this language, I have these thoughts and these opinions and these judgments. All of that completely ends. Can you imagine? It's really hard to imagine that. It's hard to imagine because we've never been anything other than that. We've never been outside of that identity that we've built up, from our childhood to now. But when we die, that is over. We're totally separated from that. It's kind of like like a dream. In a dream, you get a very traumatic or intense dream. It all seems so real, and you wake up and it's completely over. It's hard to believe it just happened. After we die away from this life, then it's just like, think of the events of 10 years ago. You were in a certain place with certain people doing something, and now that's just a distant memory. It's completely over. But that's just one, set of events. Death is like the whole thing, everything we've known, basically. Because most of us, we don't have any memories of a past life. So it's not like we have any identification with something before. All we have is what we know and what we've experienced in this life. And then to be separated from all of that, it'd be traumatic, I think. If you're not prepared for it, if you haven't thought about it, it'd be very traumatic. But here, the focus is really on thinking clearly about what does death entail, what does that mean? And then realizing, wow, this life I have now where I can, especially, because again, in the Buddhist view, so I have to keep coming back to the Buddhist view because that's the perspective. He's assuming we already have that view, right? So without being informed about that perspective, what he's saying doesn't quite make sense. So he's assuming we have this Buddhist view that not only there are past lives, there are future lives. Then future lives, what kind of life is possible? It's not just that, like many people have the idea that they have the idea that in each successive life there's just a gradual upward progression. Like in each life we learn something and then we move on to a next opportunity, we learn something, we move on to the next opportunity. So we just become kind of better and better and better, more knowledgeable, more experienced, better and better and better. Buddhist view is not like that at all. Buddhist view is just like, depending on what kind of karma you create, next life it can be better or it can be worse. It depends on you, it depends on your own actions. If in this, basically, like in this life, if we try to be a good person, we're honest, we're moral, we try to help others, we try not to harm others, then we create causes that in the next life be a little better. It'll be a good life. But in this life, if we don't care about, all we care about is ourselves. We don't care about anyone else. So we cheat, steal, lie, betray other people, abuse, belittle, use and abuse other people, just harm. If it doesn't matter about harming other people because it only matters if I get what I want or not. Then, we create a lot of harm, then it's likely next life we take a lower rebirth. So what does lower rebirth mean? It means rebirth as an animal. So it's not that humans always take rebirth as humans. Even, of course, within the human rebirth, some have very more privileged conditions, some have much more difficult circumstances, right? No question. But even it's not necessarily the case that we take rebirth as a human being. We can take rebirth as an animal, and then there's these other kind of spirits, like ghosts, that are kind of craving things all the time and never able to get sustenance, called hungry ghosts. And then we can also, in Buddhism, just like Hinduism, Christianity, every other major world religion, there's also hell, hot and cold hells. That would be incredible, this kind of existence that is qualified by incredibly intense, different forms of suffering. Why? Because we've harmed other people in such a powerful way that we've created the causes to experience this kind of suffering ourselves. And then there's also, so it's possible to take these very lower rebirths as a hell being, hungry ghost or animal, or an upper rebirth as a human being, and then a god and demigod, these kind of celestial beings. So his perspective here is that based on our own actions, what we do in this life, previous lives, then that determines what kind of rebirth we take. But the end of this life is coming. So one is, death is certain to happen. There's no question that we're going to die, right? If you have a question about that, just look at anybody who existed 150 years ago, and you can do a survey of all the people who existed 150 years ago. Try to find someone who's not dead, right? They're all dead, right? And we are no different than those people, right? So eventually, we will all be dead. So death is certain to happen. Why? Because there's no one who's ever escaped death. Ordinary person. Two, because no matter what we do, it cannot stop death. No matter where we go in the world, you can't go to a place where you can escape death. No matter what medicines you take, there's no medicine that can prevent death from happening. No matter how healthy you are, what kind of good food you eat, what kind of exercise regimen you do, you can't prevent death. And then third, because death is becoming closer to us every moment. Every moment that we live, we're only closer to death. We never, of course we can do things to live longer, like if we, stop eating salt or exercise well or, stop smoking. We can do things to increase the chances that we have a longer life. But still, every moment, every minute that passes, we're 1 minute closer to our death, no matter if that's going to be farther off or nearer. We're only moving closer to death. So one is, we're certain to die. And the second is, the time when we'll die is completely uncertain, right? Because we have no fixed lifespan. Some people die when they're just, a few days old. Some when they're a few years old. Some, when they're in the 30s, 40s, 50s. People die at all different ages. And there's no telling that we won't be one of those people. Like, can you guarantee that you'll be alive tomorrow this time? Can you know with any certitude that tomorrow at, 7:10 in the evening, you'll be alive? I mean, I can't. Probably we will. But it's definitely not certain. I mean, who knows? And then another is because there's all different ways to die. Think of all the different ways people die. They fall off buildings, they get hit by cars, they fall into holes in the road, they choke on things, choke on the food they eat or drink, or just die for no reason while in their sleep. There's all kinds of get murdered, get bombed, the natural disaster, earthquake. Here we don't have those, fortunately. Bangalore's very good that way. No earthquakes, no tornadoes, no tsunamis, no hurricanes. It's very good. No volcanoes. What? Dengue fever. Yeah, these days, I'm afraid of the mosquitoes, you get this dengue fever. And who knows, someone with Ebola could just arrive on a flight tonight, Start spreading Ebola around. So there's all different kinds of ways to die, and also you look at the body is extremely fragile. You hear the people just in a long distance flight, and they get some blood clot in their leg, and then it goes to their brain, and then they die, like that. The body is extremely fragile. We stop breathing for just a few moments, we're dead. Something goes wrong in the brain, we're dead. We get something goes wrong in the kidneys, the liver. It's like the body is very fragile. So for all these reasons then, there's no certainty when death is certain to come. When death will come, it's not certain whatsoever. So that's what he's talking about. By looking at how understanding the fact of death gives us an appreciation for life and the opportunity. We have so many opportunities to do something very useful, do something good with our life, right? But if we don't really think about how that opportunity is going to come to an end, it's like a window of opportunity that we have to do something really meaningful. Because think about it, if we take rebirth as an animal, for instance, what good can we do, with our life? If we take rebirth as an animal, we're totally act under the power of instincts, that we have no control over. Of course, as humans we have instincts, but we can decide to follow them or not, right? Luckily, otherwise it'd be a mess. But animals, there's no space in the mind to think about, do I follow the instincts or not? What do I do? There's no space in the mind to do that. They just act blindly. So as human beings, we have intelligence, right? And we have some kind of self-control. We can decide how to use our life. But it's like a window of opportunity we have with this human rebirth. And with this window, we can learn things, and then especially we can learn about how karma works, we can learn about how rebirth works, and then we can determine what kind of rebirth we take in the future, and after that, and we can determine like what direction we take this whole stream of existence that we have that moves from life to life. We can direct it in a good way. But if we totally don't pay any attention to about what's going on, why did I take rebirth? Do previous lives exist? Do future lives, past and future lives exist? If so, what determines how we move through them? Why do I have pleasant, happy experiences sometimes and miserable experiences other times? What are the causes of those? Everything arises from causes and conditions. So the thing we want most is well-being and happiness. So what are the causes of that? The thing we don't want is misery and harm and problems, all kinds of suffering. What are the causes of that? Now we have an opportunity to try to understand that and do something, to create the causes for what we want, and eliminate the causes for what we don't want. But if we don't recognize the kind of preciousness of this opportunity that we have as a human being, by recognizing that death is certain to happen, and then who knows what's going to happen after we die. We have no control. Then we let the whole thing just go to waste, right? So let's look at verse 6 again. When having blocked off every escape route, the Lord of Death is looking for someone to kill. How can I enjoy eating? And likewise, how can I enjoy sleep? So knowing that death is come, and death is coming, and there's no telling when it's coming, while I'm eating, while I'm sleeping, how can I enjoy doing these other things without, doing something meaningful with my life? And then 7, for as long as death is actually approaching, then I shall accumulate merits, right? So I shall accumulate positive energy. I shall try to do good things. Then I shall accumulate merits. Even if I then put a stop to laziness, what will be the use? That is not the time. So he's saying, okay, well maybe as death is, when I see that I'm about to die, then I'll do good things, right? And he's saying, well, what's the use? By then you have no time left to do anything. You need to do something from now. Then 8, when this has not been done, when this is being done, and when this is only half finished, suddenly the Lord of Death will come, and the thought will occur, oh no, I'm done for. So he's saying, if we put off thinking about death and the meaning of life, then suddenly, while we're in the middle, the aspirations we have, when we haven't yet, we're putting them off, then we think, I'll do it later, when those are not done. The things that we're in the midst of doing, the things that are only half finished, suddenly in the midst of those, death will happen, right? The Lord of Death will come. And then the thought, oh no, I'm done for, will come. So he's saying, before that happens, figure out what's most meaningful to you and do it now. Don't put it off. 9, their faces flowing with tears, and their eyes red and swollen with sorrow. My relatives will finally lose hope, and I shall behold the vision of the messengers of death. So imagine, you get sick, you get cancer or something, and then, you're laying in the hospital, and your relatives have been struggling, to give you the right medicine, the right treatment, surgery, whatever. But finally they recognize that, there's no hope, you're not going to recover. You're going to die. So at that time, their faces flowing with tears, their eyes red and swollen with sorrow. My relatives will finally lose hope for my recovery, and I shall behold the vision of the messengers of death. So he's saying this moment is going to come, eventually. Then 10, tormented by the memory of my wrongdoing, and hearing the sounds of hell, in terror I shall clothe my body in excrement. What virtue can I do in such a delirious state? So for most of us this probably isn't the case, but if we use our lives to do extremely harmful, destructive things to other people, in past lives we've all done such things, but in this life, if we do things that we're full of hatred and malevolence, for others. Hatred is such a destructive attitude. We live a life full of anger and hatred, and don't care at all about the other people around us. Just drink and beat our spouse, or cheat our business partners, or malign our relatives or stuff. Then at the end of our life, as we're dying, then it said the karma that's going to throw us in the next life, it can even start to ripen in this life as we're dying away. There's many stories of people, as they're passing away. It's interesting to look at how people die. Very fascinating. Different. Maybe I'm sure you have stories floating around your own families, or relatives, or sometimes you hear about neighbors, or you talk to people who work in like hospices or hospitals, nurses. Talk to them. It's interesting. People work in hospitals because they see so many people die. They see all the different conditions in which people die. Some people die very, very peacefully. Some people, it's like screaming and thrashing about, and then they're very, very... These days, of course, with medication, mostly people are heavily medicated when they die, so maybe there's not so much of that trauma. But like I know one of my friends, he's a very senior monk, one of the most senior Western, one of the first Westerners to become Buddhist monk back in the early 70s. He became ordained. He's from Australia. He's just one story I think of. He told me, actually it was because of him seeing his father die, the way his father died, that caused him to go and seek out like spiritual knowledge. That's why he came to India and then eventually became ordained. But he's from this very wealthy family in Australia. His father was a butcher, but on a like mass scale, like factory, selling. They would, in Australia they raise a lot of sheep on what do they call them? There's a huge tracts of land, it's very dry, scrub brush, where they run sheep. There's a special name.
Prairies.
Not prairies. Prairies are in the U.S.
Yes, these are the outbacks.
Yeah, it's in the outback, but there's sheep. Anyway, there's like huge sheep ranches.
Sheep stations.
Stations, yes, exactly, stations. Yeah, thank you. So there's huge stations, huge tracts of land where they raise sheep. Most of the sheep they sell in the Middle East. I didn't know. So his father is Jewish, but they're in the business of buying all these sheep and then putting them on ships and shipping them to the Middle East. They have to be alive, for halal, the halal meat. And his father, he said, was very kind, very honest businessman, very charitable, donated to all these charitable projects in their community, hospitals and schools and stuff, and very good person. But then his father got sick and he's dying, and so my friend, he's the son, right? So he grew up very wealthy, with his own jetting around here and there, going to his parties, and having expensive cars, a lot of girlfriends. And then he saw his father got sick, he's dying, he was with his father as he's dying, and as his father was dying, he was horrendous. He was like thrashing around and screaming and totally like, total confusion and in excruciating pain, right? Not because of the sickness, but he said because of like hallucinations, like that his father was having hallucinations. And then he's convinced, my friend is convinced, is because he'd slaughtered so many animals, he caused the death of so many sheep, that karma to be slaughtered, was ripening on his father. So for him, my friend, it was so traumatic experience that he kind of gave up his whole luxurious lifestyle and came to India, Nepal, in search of some kind of spiritual knowledge, then met Buddhist teachers and became ordained. He's still ordained till this time. Actually, he gave like all of his wealth, several millions of dollars to Lama Geshe. That's how they bought. We have this. We're part of an international group of Buddhist centers. We have one in Dharamsala, in Himachal Pradesh, in Dharamsala, a very nice piece of land in Dharamsala. That was bought with this guy's money. He offered it Lama Geshe. Also, I've heard from some nurses. They told me usually alcoholics, people alcoholic, they tend to have much more. A lot of trauma at the time of death. But so if we use our life just in a very destructive way, then at the time of death, there's nothing we can do about it, right? That's what he's saying there. Then verse 11, even in this life I shall be gripped with fear, like that of a live fish being rolled in hot sand. Why even mention the unbearable agonies of hell that will result from my unwholesome deeds? Right? So he's just saying, even in this life, if you harm others, you use your life to belittle, betray, lie, cheat others, then you'll have a lot of anguish. For example, think about when you lie, just lie to one person. Then you create this fear that they're going to realize you lied to them, right? Because if they know you lied to them, then they're going to be, angry with you, upset with you, right? So it's like, even you lie just once to another person, you create fear of your being caught out. Even in business also, if you cheat, you cheat a customer in business, then it's like you create a kind of, you destroy the trust with the person. You lower your own, inwardly you lower your own, your own esteem for yourself. Your own self-respect. becomes lower because you know you're lying, you're cheating people. And then, but then also you become kind of paranoid that other people are cheating you. You see, you start to have a doubt that other people are lying to you, and other people are cheating you, because you know you do that. So then you kind of automatically think, well, other people probably do that too. And you start to generate a lot of doubt, and then you can't trust anyone. And then that becomes, and then you become lonely, right? When you feel like you can't trust anyone, then you feel like you're in competition with other people. So it causes a lot of mental disturbance for yourself. Where if you yourself are totally honest, then you feel more like you can trust other people. Of course, you can't trust everyone. That's not realistic, right? But if you yourself are honest, it's like you can identify, when other people are honest, you can more easily identify that. And then you can deal with and surround yourself with other people who are honest, rather than eventually being surrounded by other people who also cheat you. Okay. So even in this life, then there's a lot of suffering if we harm others. Then verse 12. How can I remain at ease like this when I have committed actions that will bear fruit? That will bear fruit in my delicate infant's body, encountering boiling acids and in the hell of tremendous heat. So, I mean, another thing is, even if we, in this life we haven't done anything very bad, but if it's true that we had infinite past lives, then in the infinite lives we've done everything bad there is to do, we've done it all, right? And a lot of the karma of that remains. So there's no telling what kind of karma we have. The karmic imprints that exist in our mind stream aren't only those that were created in this life. We've created karmas for countless past lives. So, so he's saying now as a human being we have intelligence and we have the ability to choose what to do, right? So if we recognize that it's probably the case that I created a lot of negative karmas in past life, we can do something to remedy that, right? To purify those, to eliminate the force of those, and make sure that our future life is a happy one. So we should recognize that opportunity we have now and use it, rather than just taking the risk that we'll fall into hell in the future. Then 13, much harm befalls those with little forbearance, and those who want results without making any effort. While clasped by death, they shall cry like gods, "Oh no, I am overcome by misery." Right? So if we don't make any effort to do anything useful in this life, then we'll have all this regret of death. Then 14, relying upon the boat of a human body, free yourself from the great river of pain. As it is hard to find this boat again, there is no time for sleep, you fool. So this is probably the most famous verse from this chapter. So it's so imagine the analogy, it's an analogy here, right? There's a great river, right? The great river of pain is an analogy for samsara, right? So imagine this huge river, and if we're in a river, we're just being carried along. If we don't have a boat, we're just swimming in the river. We can't really control where we go, because imagine like the Brahma. Have you ever gone to Guwahati? I went to Guwahati in Assam, capital of Assam. The Brahmaputra is the Brahmaputra famous river, very huge, powerful river, very swiftly flowing. So that if you're swimming across it, there's no way you're going to get to the other side. Like it's so big, and the current's so strong. Like you're going to be helplessly just carried by the river. So the karma are afflictive emotions, anger, attachment, and ignorance. And then the karma we create out of attachment and greed, craving things, out of hostility and hatred towards some. Then we engage in all kinds of karma, all through the force of ignorance, not knowing how law of cause and effect works, and grasping in a kind of self that doesn't exist. So as long as we're kind of an animal or a hell being, we have no control to do anything about these habitual tendencies that we have to create negative karma. So like that, from rebirth, one rebirth to another, we're carried through birth, old age, sickness, and death. Birth, old age, sickness, and death, again and again, like being carried by a great river. Right? But now, we have the boat of the human body. So in this human form, it's like a boat. Instead of just swimming in the river and being completely carried along, like the other kinds of rebirth, as hell being hungry ghost animal. Now it's like, this human body, because we have intelligence, it's like a boat. We have an oar, and we can actually cross the river and get beyond, get out of this this totally destructive river, right? So relying on the boat of a human body, free yourself from the great river of pain, of samsara, while you have a chance. As this boat is very hard to find again, as it is hard to find this boat again, so it's extremely difficult to take rebirth as a human being. Why? Because the main cause of rebirth as a human being is practicing pure morality. Like just look at the animal kingdom. Just look at like dogs on the street. No, they're so prone to being attacked by other dogs, to being not being able to find food, not being able to find shelter. You know, when it's hot, they're just hot. When it's cold, they're cold. When it rains, they get wet. When a big, more strong dog comes, they just have to leave. You know, even if they get food and then some other dogs come and chase them away, they can't get food. If no one gives them the food, then they're just starving. Very little they can do to ameliorate their suffering, right? And not to mention control over thoughts about like, what kind of rebirth will I take? And what can I do to create causes to have a good future life? No thought of that whatsoever, right? So, so then if you think, so first of all, like just a street dog's life, there's no morality, there's no laws, right? It's a totally lawless world. It's just the strongest wins. No? It's whatever physically is the stronger dog, that's the one that gets whatever they want. If the weaker dog, they just have to make do with what they can get. So there's no like, you can't take another dog to court because you bit me in a way I didn't like it or something, or you killed my puppies or something. There's nothing like that. It's totally like, why am I saying this now? So think about a dog's world, there's no morality, right? Morality like doesn't make sense, like not harming others. Whereas compared to human beings, generally we treat each other with respect. We have laws according to which we have to live. I can't just get, if I get angry, I can't just go kill someone. I can, but then I'll be put in prison, right? So generally, the human society is so much more peaceful. It's so much more peaceful to be a human than it is to be a dog in one way, right? Of course, we have a lot more mental tension than dogs have. That way they're more relaxed. But as far as just like physical harm, like we don't have to worry about, someone just coming up and like stabbing us or shooting us. It's like very rarely happens. Whereas in the dog world, they get to attack each other all the time. So the main cause of, because human life is compared to like life with animal, hungry ghost, hell being, it's very peaceful, relatively free from harm. The main cause for that is practicing pure morality. Why? Because pure morality means not harming others, right? So by not harming others, you create the cause to live a life where you're not harmed by others. You have a peaceful life, right? So can you imagine, what can a dog do to create rebirth as a human? Can a dog practice pure morality? It's like they don't even have the thought to think, I shouldn't, even though I'm angry at that other dog, I shouldn't harm them. I shouldn't steal their food. I shouldn't bark at them. I shouldn't bite them. I shouldn't kill their puppies or something. They don't have the thought. They just follow their instinct and do whatever seems like it's going to bring them physical gratification primarily. And they want food and sex. That's what dogs want. Food, sex, and kind of shelter. Just peace. So there's no morality. So how are they going to create the cause to take rebirth as a human being? It's like almost impossible. So that's why human rebirth is extremely difficult to find, because the main cause is practicing pure morality. In most states of rebirth, there's no opportunity to practice pure morality. There's not much ability. So, So the Buddha taught that actually taking rebirth, the Shakyamuni Buddha in a sutra gave an analogy. He said, precious human rebirth is like a golden ring floating around on the surface of the ocean, like a golden hoop floating around on the surface of the ocean, carried here and there by the wind and the currents and the waves. And then the sentient beings are like a sea turtle that only takes one breath every 100 years. Every 100 years, can you imagine a sea turtle? They have to breathe air, right? So they come up to the surface, take a breath of air, and then dive down again. And then 100 years later, they come up, take another breath of air, dive down again. So that every year is like a rebirth, So Buddha is saying most of the time that sea turtle is down deep in the ocean. So that's like most of the time we're down in the lower realms, taking rebirth in hell, hunger goes to animal rebirth. Every 100 rebirths, maybe we get a human rebirth. But then even that human rebirth, the chances that this golden yoke floating around on the surface of the ocean, so what are the chances that sea turtle is going to one time come up and put its head through the golden ring on this, that's floating around the surface of the ocean? It's almost impossible, right? So that golden ring represents like the teachings, the Buddhist teachings of the Buddha, which show what are the causes of happiness, what are the causes of suffering, how karma works, how to be free from samsara, and how to achieve full enlightenment. Like, what are the chances that that sea turtle is going to come up and put its head through that golden ring floating around the surface of the ocean? That's like, okay, we take human rebirth once in a while, but among the human beings, who are those that know how to know like about past and future lives? Or what are the causes, the karmic causes of suffering and happiness? And what keeps us trapped, what is the primary cause that keeps us trapped in samsara? And how to eliminate that, and thereby how to be free from this whole process of rebirth and death again and again and again. Very few, right? It's almost impossible. But now we have that opportunity. We have the human rebirth, and we met, spiritual, very, profound spiritual teachings, and we have the opportunity to practice, to use our life in an effective and meaningful way. So that's what he's saying. Relying on the boat of a human body, free yourself from the great river of pain. Free yourself from all the suffering of samsara. As it is very hard to find this boat again, there is no time for sleep, you fool. So don't waste your time by just sleeping and engaging in meaningless activities. Okay, so I'll stop there for today. I've been talking straight for over 1 hour. So if you have any questions, then I can try to answer.
Steve Jobs, I said something very similar. He said, look upon each day that you get up as a miracle. You never know, you may not be alive tomorrow.
Yeah.
And he should know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when you die slowly with cancer, you have time to think about those things.
And not too old.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. If we really think seriously, I could die tonight, which is a real possibility, then you think, wow. Then if you wake up to, really take that, really take it to heart. Feel deeply, yeah, it's true, I could die tonight, and then everything I have is completely over. Then waking up tomorrow morning, it really feels like, wow, amazing. I have this opportunity to do so many different things. Other questions? That wasn't a question, actually.
I have a question on Dharma, not directly related to what we've done.
Sure.
So there's a concept that karma is expandable. In theoretical terms I can understand, but what is the logic behind it? We do think, how can we analyze that if there's a negative seed, if there's a negative karma that I've done, and then we say that it expands. If you don't purify it, it expands. And the same goes for the positive. But I don't understand the underlying logic behind it, or if we can prove that in any way.
Yeah, I don't think you can prove that anywhere. There's some things, there's something that the Buddha taught that you can't prove with logic. And there's a lot of the workings of karma are like that. Like it's really difficult to see how to make a proof for it. But especially that property of karma. Like there's four main properties of karma, right? That karma is certain, and that negative karmas only produce suffering, and positive karmas only produce happiness. And then karma never, well, she's talking about multiplies, but so then, what is it? Once a karma is created, until it ripens or it's been destroyed by a counteractive force, it always remains. And you never experience the results of karma you didn't create. Those are the other three. Those are all a little easier to kind of get your head around, right? But this one that karma is expanding. Once you create a karma, its power to produce a result increases.
Like we have other concepts also, rebirth, which we might not have very conclusive proof. But we have at least stories, or at least how we feel, at least we can analyze a lot of things in perspective of other theories. But this is one, karma is expandable. I never able to understand that.
No, I don't think I can give you a proof for it, actually. So those things, those things that can't be proven with just logic, ordinary logic. So usually the reasoning to establish that they're true is to establish that the person who taught them is a valid person, right? That they're not saying that in order to deceive, and that they have access to knowledge that we don't have access to. So that means the Buddha, right? Establishing the Buddha is a valid person. How do you establish the Buddha? The Buddha is a valid person by looking at the other things, the uncommon things he taught that nobody else taught, that we can establish with just logic. So that means selflessness and emptiness, and basically the Four Noble Truths. So by establishing that what he taught about selflessness, the cause of samsara, that we can establish by just reason. And then he taught that why? In order for personal gain? No, out of compassion for others. Then he established he's someone who's teaching what he knows in order to benefit others. And he had access to, because of his level of spiritual realization, he has access to knowledge that ordinary people don't. And therefore he taught this. But there's no way to prove that otherwise. So, yeah, that one, now it's kind of not satisfying in a way, but yeah.
Can we look on it as, okay, she's talking about it, it multiplies in terms of the effect. But if it is not purified, it multiplies in terms of its effect. Yeah. But if you look at it from a causal point of view, in a very practical sense, the more you go on doing it, it becomes more of an habituation.
Yeah, but that's different though, that's not. That's true, it becomes habituation, but yeah.
Can we think through from another analogy? Say for instance, somebody comes up with a recipe of non-veg, like chicken lollipop and all.
Yeah.
It gets fascinated and people likes it. The more people likes it, the more people consumes it. So more people consumes it, so there will be more chickens getting butchered. So that way, the individual who bought the concept of a chicken lollipop or tasty or some whatever recipe, so by virtue of bringing that concept only, he or she has committed a negative karma. So that gets exponentially, it has a negative effect. Because of that, also people try to kill more chickens. So if you see backwards, as a chain, the person who initiated it to negative karma, we should get it back.
Yeah, that's the habitude. That becomes the
Yeah, but that's also not quite, because the characteristic of karma expanding.
Directly relating it what she trying to understand the logic, I think that should fit out.
Sure. Abid?
Venerable, it has actually been proved several times in quantum physics. Not specifically for karma. Not the question that she's asked.
Yeah,
very related to it. For example, a thought. A thought or an emotion. These are not nothings. And a thought, when it is generated and put out there, it doesn't just. First of all, it is something, and secondly, it has an energy. So it either dies or it expands, and it has been seen and it has been proven in laboratory tests. They've been written about it.
I disagree, but I don't think. What quantum physicist studies thoughts? I don't think so.
They're a very strong form of energy, Venerable.
Physical energy?
Energy. You can feel.
Energy is physical. We're talking about energy, or you're just talking about something physical, right? Thoughts are not physical.
You can
They're
feel
non-physical.
You can feel a person's thoughts.
Yeah. Normally, if you buy some of people's experiences, example for instance, I have certain friends who were working in some parlors. So they say the people generally tends to release energies, negative energies and positive energies.
Yeah.
Some people, when they come to parlor and all, the moment they're getting a treatment, the other person who is applying the treatment, they feel that negative energy and they feel very tired, lethargic.
Absolutely.
That kind of impact they're facing. And on the other hand,
that's fine, but that's not the characteristic of expansion of karma that Shogun is asking about.
Responding to that question, but the continuation is what she's saying.
Yeah.
Because energy does expand. So.
But in quantum physics, the description of expansion is the Schrödinger equation. It's called the Schrödinger equation. It describes how.
That's why.
Yeah, Schrödinger's cat. That as long as something's not being observed, the potential, the field of the potential and the potential places it could exist, it expands out, right? And then when it's observed, it collapses to a specific point. And I mean, some quantum physicists, not the mainstream ones, but they think the thing that causes, the catalyst that causes the collapse of the, what is it called? The field of potential can be the observation, the act of observation, which includes a consciousness engaging it. But as far as thoughts expanding out and affecting other things, yeah, I don't know. But even if that is the case, that's not what we're talking about in this characteristic of karma expanding. It's similar, but it's not the thing.
That's what I said. It's similar. It's not exactly answer her question, but in a way it does, because your karma is made up of what you've done and what you've thought and what you've felt.
Your intention, primarily. Karma is the mental factor of intention.
Yes.
Yeah.
The negative effects of any action that we do could actually happen over a period of time. They could multiply over a period of time.
Let's take another example. Say for an instance, there's one gangster who's making a quick, easy bucks, right? That the influence that can leave to the youngsters of the generation next to make an easy bucks by killing people.
I know. That's similar to the example you just gave about lollipop chicken.
That can also happen, right? Similar.
Huh? Yeah, but that's one person affecting other people and having a ripple effect.
The chicken lollipop example, what is the person who does it?
But every action has a ripple effect, right?
If it doesn't, he doesn't do it with that intention.
Yeah.
That fits well in terms of...
But it still has an effect on other people.
It does have an effect.
Yeah, it still has an effect.
And then it comes back to you.
Yes.
Because you generated it.
Yeah.
So that is karma. That's karma.
I think that's the only analogy I can think of.
Do you have any more questions, or you have only comments about her question? You guys are all just commenting about her question, but not having any question.
Very interesting.
I have one question.
Please.
Since now, from a Buddhist perspective, life is, we are into its kind of samsara cycle of existence. People till going out of this things, the karmic samsara, we believe that we are gaining next rebirth, right? Maybe higher lanes or lower lanes in karma. Yeah. But at times, like people with the bad karma, maybe as you quoting some examples, tend to have a very difficult situation till the time they're facing the death. So at that time, we have a current concept of euthanasia, what we call it. Euthanasia.
Yeah.
So kind of a legal death. So if somebody restores to that kind of an avenue, how do Buddhism see it? Though
euthanasia?
It could be like delaying kind of a pain right now. Maybe in the next life you can take that. How does Buddhism see for that?
I mean, euthanasia is...
so because basically, I don't want to have that pain right now. Maybe in the next life I will take it.
But you're talking about killing oneself and suicide.
Right. Could be either ways.
Yeah. I mean, it's an act of killing, right? Life is something extremely precious.
Right.
So whenever you intentionally destroy life, it's a negative act. Although, I mean, there's two different kinds of motivation, right? There's the causal motivation and the motivation at the time of the act. So for euthanasia, the causal motivation is generally very positive, right? Because they want, if it's relatives killing another relative, the person killing himself, they're experiencing tremendous pain, usually physical and mental pain and suffering. They recognize they're not going to be able to recover. So they don't see any point going on enduring that, and rather just bring that to an end. So out of compassion, wanting to be free from suffering for oneself, or wanting to free someone else from suffering, that's a positive motivation. But then the actual act is doing something to destroy the life of the person, which is killing, right? Killing is by nature negative. So it's a mixed karma, right?
They call it mercy killing.
Yeah, mercy killing.
So in the similar note,
but wait. So the person's experiencing suffering, suffering, whatever sickness they have, because of negative karma. It's negative karma ripening. So by killing the person, what you do is you cease the conditions for that karma to keep ripening. So that karma will ripen. It will continue ripening in the future. Maybe not the next rebirth necessarily, but the karma has not been exhausted, right? So there's still karma to ripen yet. So it's not that they'll ultimately just escape that suffering, because in a future rebirth, eventually that karma will ripen.
So I think that will also, to what she has...
But that's not to say that we should always endlessly just continue life support systems. I think that's different. Because these days in hospitals, they have all these artificial life support systems which artificially prolong life much more than natural. So my own personal view, and this is not something taught by Buddhist lamas or the Buddha, the issue didn't exist during the Buddhist time, but is that, to remove life support systems and just let nature take its course is not killing, right? But that's, kind of a gray area.
Similar analogy, if I continue my life till 60s, 70s, till I'm ill and healthy properly, and after that, if some disease or something checks me on, rather than going for treatment, I just sit on a solace and do nature take its toll. So would it be considered as killing, self-killing, or what?
No, because killing has to be the intention to end someone's life. So in that case, it's not like you have the intention to end your life.
I don't eat anything or drink anything, then it's have starvation?
If you just
rather
feel like
prolonging the suffering,
again, mostly, whether something is negative karma or positive karma, it depends on the intention. Actually, karma is primarily intention. It's the mental factor of intention.
I don't want to...
so it depends what's the intention for your natural eating or drinking anything. Yeah, but okay, but are you intending to kill yourself or not, is the question. If it becomes killing or not.
It sees life.
Why are you interested in this question anyway?
That's kind of the thought I have in terms of if individual is leading a life entirely for 70, 80 years, and after that one has to come to a situation that he has to go through this illness, sickness and all, rather than suffering oneself as well as to the near and dear ones nearby, why not to seize it there and then get it in next time?
Just try to use your life well now, and then when you reach that situation, it'll become more clear to you what to do. We can go on describing infinite different permutations of different possibilities and speculating about what we would do in that situation, but when we reach the actual situation, it's so much more complex and nuanced than we can ever imagine.
As we know, the death is certain.
Yeah. So prepare for it from now.
Prepare well for it. That's what I would believe.
Would you say karma takes the person's circumstances and conditioning into account?
Well, karma is not like a person who takes different variables into account. Karma is a natural law, right? So, the natural law, it's like, if we plant a corn seed, and then the corn grows, does the corn seed take into account like the richness of the soil and the amount of moisture and the temperature of the air? Those things all play a role in determining how it grows, but it's not like the corn is like thinking, oh, today it's cold, so I'll grow less, and today there's more moisture, so I'll grow faster. It's just all of those things naturally affect how it grows. So karma is like that. Mainly it's a mental factor of intention, but there's also, the object in relation to which we perform an action. Like killing is one kind of karma, for example. If we kill our parents, it's much heavier. If we kill, someone who's attacking us, and we're just trying to defend ourselves, it's much lighter, right? The same action, but a different object. Like our parents who've been so kind to us, it's a heavier object. So there's the object, there's the actual action, there's the completion, there's the motivation, and then there's the intention. So all of those affect like how light or heavy or good or bad like the karma is. But it's not like the karma thinks about those things. It's just they all naturally play a role in what kind of karma is created. But the main thing we can control is our intention, right? So that's the main thing we need to pay attention to day in and day out. That's why it's important to take time to think about our motivation. Why am I doing this? At the beginning of every day and in the course of every activity, think, why am I engaging in this activity connected to a long-term goal that we want to achieve, and then how does this connect to achieving that? Then everything we do in our life becomes meaningful, a meaningful part of one kind of project. Otherwise, if we're just haphazardly doing this and then doing that without any real reason why I'm doing that, then our life is just kind of fragmented, and we have no sense of meaning. And then at the end of the life, we'll look back and it's like we did a bunch of things, but if we have no sense of why, then it's like, as a human being, that's one of the most precious things we have, is the ability to think about things and do things for a reason. That's what distinguishes us from animals, is that we can consider, we can contemplate, we can analyze, we can think, we can consider, we can take store of, take measure of why, how do I want to be? We can ask that question and make a decision about it. So if we don't use that ability, that unique opportunity we have as a human being to think about why am I doing what I'm doing, it's like a huge wasted opportunity. It's like the best thing we could have done with our life is kind of we didn't do, right? So that's why it's important to think about the fact of death. To give us a sense of, what is this life I have? What is unique about it? What is different about it than the lives of other kinds of beings? Right? So how do I take the essence from it? Right? Why don't we do a little meditation? And we have 10 minutes left. So get comfortable in meditation posture. Take a few deep breaths, kind of relax. Kind of clear your mind out a little bit. And gradually bring your mental focus within. So for the next 5 minutes, I ask you just to think about these two questions we've been kind of talking about a lot. One is it true that by thinking about our own imminent death, that helps to clarify what's meaningful in our life? And then the second, just the same question we thought about at the beginning. For us, what is most meaningful to do in life? What is the kind of thing we wouldn't want to leave undone? At the time we're dying, we would not want to see that we hadn't done anything about. So two questions. Again, the first question, is it true that thinking about our own death helps to clarify what's meaningful in life? And the second, for us, what is most meaningful in life? Again. So take 5 minutes, think about those issues, or any other way you'd like to think. can stop there. So then let's just dedicate the merit. So think of whatever positive energy we've created during the session, whatever virtuous karma or merit we've created, and rejoice, think how good it is. We'll try to do something useful with our time, something beneficial for ourselves and others. So rejoice, think how excellent it is. And then we can think by the force of these virtuous actions. May we, ourselves, and all other sentient beings be freed from hunger, thirst, sickness, and disease, mental confusion, relationship problems, depression, sadness. May all beings have health, live long lives, be surrounded by loving, kind, compassionate friends and companions. Have food, water, drink, medicines to cure their sickness. In short, may all beings have every cause for every form of well-being, happiness, to full enlightenment. May all beings be free from every form of violence and suffering. Especially all the wars, every place in the world where there's wars and violent conflict, may it come to an end. May all people who are oppressed and enslaved or abused, abusive relationships, be free from those. All who are addicted to drugs and alcohol, be free from those. Everywhere in the world where there's drought and other natural disasters, outbreaks of diseases, may those be eliminated. And especially may the great kind of impending tragedy of global warming be reversed. And may all the rivers be flow with clean water. Everywhere, may our physical environment be completely pure, clean. And may all beings have access to whatever spiritual guidance is most suitable to their dispositions, including all the people who've taken rebirth in the lower realms as hell beings, hungry ghost animals. May they be free. May their karma to exist in those places be completely exhausted. May they take a precious human rebirth. And may all beings quickly be able to be free from samsara and achieve full enlightenment. And may all of our actions only be beneficial to ourselves and others. So thank you very much. That concludes the session today.
Tomorrow we have a session